Hello, my name is Angela Schumann and I am the Shakespeare Whisperer. In this video, I want to talk about the most awkward marriage proposal in Shakespeare, and it takes place in my favourite play, Measure for Measure. It happens right at the end of the play when Duke Vincentio, who's like the king, proposes marriage to Isabella, the female lead. So the background to this is that Isabella wants to be a nun, and she makes that very clear from the start. She doesn't want to get married. But this man who is temporarily in control of the city blackmails her into having marital relations with him by giving her an ultimatum. He says, "Your brother will die unless you sleep with me." And this horrible situation is all seen by the Duke, who's working in the background behind the scenes, and he swoops in at the last minute, saves her brother, saves her from the clutches of this evil man, and sets everything to rights. Then, at the very end of the play, in the final lines, he turns to her and proposes marriage to her. And this is what he says. So he's just given a huge display of power. He's just said, you should be killed, but I will spare your lives. You marry her, and then he turns to Isabella and says, "Dear Isabel, I have a motion much imports your good. Whereto, if you'll a willing ear incline, what's mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. So bring us to our palace, where we'll show what's yet behind that's meet you all should know." Boom, the play ends. Now, when a lot of people see this or read this, scholars included, they think, "Oh, awesome, isn't that wonderful? Happily ever after. The hero marries the heroine, Isabella gets her prince, her duke, and everyone lives happily ever after. Yay!" But if we look more closely at this situation, we realize that not only is it awkward, but it is deeply, deeply disturbing and very sinister. So first off, as I said, Isabella doesn't want to get married in the play. She wants to be a nun. And she's only just been saved from marital relations with this man by the Duke. So at the end of the play, it is rather shocking when he turns to her and essentially forces upon her the very thing that she said she didn't want. And the language with which he does it is also very tyrannical and manipulative. So he says, "Dear Isabel, I have a motion," after he's just had this huge display of power, showing he has power over life and death and marriage in his kingdom, and he sees all. And Angelo, who's the baddie, who tried to force her to sleep with him, recently said something like, "Your grace like power divine hath looked upon my passes." So you are like a god. You see everything. You are God. And the Duke, who's just made this huge public display of essentially being like a god, who at the start of the play said, "I do not like to stage me to men's eyes. I don't want to make a big fuss. I don't like fanfare, I'm an introvert. I just, give me a good book. I don't need to be in front of the public." And now he's set up this huge public stadium in which he is the arbiter of justice and marriage and life and death. He says to her, "Dear Isabel, I've a motion which much imports your good." If we think about this, there's kind of a subtle threat there. He's essentially saying, if you know what's good for you, you will say yes to this. "Whereto, if you'll a willing ear incline, what's mine is yours, and what is yours is mine." Which again is a little disturbing considering she's becoming a nun, she has no property, literally the only thing she has to bring is her body, the very thing she didn't want to give to a man. And then, instead of waiting for a response from her, he just says, "So come on everyone, back to the palace, where I can tell you about everything." And the play finishes without Isabella giving a response and being able to say a word. This is one of the reasons why this is what's called a problem comedy, because it's not clear and clean, happily ever after. It's a bit more messy, it's a bit more complex than that. I've seen productions of this play where Isabella is silent and then she gives this huge smile, and she and the Duke link arm in arm and go skipping off the stage and everybody dances. I've also heard of other productions. There was one production I heard of where Isabella takes out a gun from her purse and shoots herself. So there are many different ways to interpret her reaction. Another interesting element to note is that when the Duke set up everything from behind the scenes and saved everything, he allowed Isabella to believe that her brother had been killed. He knew that her brother hadn't been killed, but he allowed her to believe this and very gleefully kind of let her think that her brother's head had just been cut off. Right before the marriage proposal, he pulls off a mask and said, "Look, your brother's alive after all," which is actually quite a psychotic thing to do to somebody, and then propose marriage in public, in front of everybody, with a huge display of power without giving the person any time to respond. This, I believe, qualifies the Duke as a huge hypocrite and a very disturbing character, and his marriage proposal to Isabella as extremely awkward, to say the least. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe and hit the little notifications bell.